Marcus Williams stared at the stack of overdue bills on his kitchen counter, his coffee growing cold as the weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders. The small apartment felt even smaller with toys scattered across the living room, floor, and his 5-year-old daughter Emma's drawings taped haphazardly to the refrigerator. He rubbed his tired eyes, wondering for the 100th time that week if he was cut out for this whole parenting thing. The morning had started like every other chaotic weekday. Emma had refused to eat her cereal, insisting it tasted like yucky water, and had somehow managed to get more toothpaste on the bathroom mirror than in her mouth. Marcus had frantically searched for matching socks while she declared that her favorite purple dress was too scratchy and demanded to wear her Halloween costume to school instead. By the time they rushed out the door, both were frazzled, and Marcus felt like he was failing before the day had even begun. As a single father, Marcus had been navigating parenthood alone for 3 years now, ever since Emma's mother Sarah had walked out on them both. Sarah had claimed she wasn't ready for the responsibility, that motherhood felt like a prison and that she needed to find herself. Marcus still remembered the devastating conversation when she'd told him she was leaving, her suitcase already packed by the door. She'd kissed Emma goodbye, promising to visit soon. But the visits had become phone calls, then birthday cards, then nothing at all. At 32, Marcus felt ancient. His friends were out enjoying happy hours and weekend trips, while he was learning to braid hair through YouTube videos and trying to decipher the complex social dynamics of kindergarten playground politics. He loved Emma fiercely, but some days, the loneliness and self-doubt threatened to overwhelm him completely. The other parents at school seemed to have everything figured out, chatting easily about playdate schedules and after-school activities while Marcus stood awkwardly on the sidelines, always feeling like an outsider looking in. Work had become another source of stress. As a junior accountant at a mid-sized firm, Marcus struggled to balance the demands of his job with Emma's needs. He'd already used up most of his sick days when Emma caught every bug that went around her school, and he could feel his boss's patience wearing thin. The promotion he'd been hoping for seemed increasingly out of reach, and the financial pressure of raising a child on a single income was becoming unbearable. The breaking point came on a particularly difficult Thursday evening. Emma had a complete meltdown over homework, screaming that math was stupid and throwing her pencils across the room. When Marcus tried to calm her down, she looked at him with tears streaming down her face and said, "I want my mommy. You don't know how to take care of me, right?" The words hit him like a physical blow, confirming every fear he'd harbored about his inadequacy as a parent. That night, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, Marcus sat alone in his darkened living room, questioning everything. Maybe Sarah had been right to leave. Maybe he really wasn't cut out for this. The thought of Emma growing up with such a mess of a father filled him with guilt and shame. He'd always imagined being a dad someday, but the reality was so much harder than he'd ever anticipated. Every day felt like a series of small failures, each one adding to his growing conviction that Emma deserved better than what he could provide. His own childhood hadn't exactly provided a blueprint for success. Marcus's father had been distant and critical, more interested in his work than his son's daily struggles. His mother had tried her best, but she'd been overwhelmed trying to manage everything alone while his father traveled for business. Marcus remembered feeling invisible in his own home, and he was terrified of repeating that pattern with Emma. What if he was genetically predisposed to be a terrible father? What if all his efforts were just delaying the inevitable moment when Emma would realize how much better off she'd be without him? The next morning brought no relief. Emma woke up cranky and complained about everything from her breakfast to the weather. Getting her ready for school felt like negotiating with a tiny terrorist, and Marcus found himself snapping at her more than once. The guilt that followed each sharp word made everything worse. He watched other parents drop off their children, with easy smiles and casual conversations, wondering what secret they possessed that he clearly lacked. Standing in the school parking lot after drop-off, Marcus felt completely alone despite being surrounded by other parents. He'd tried to connect with some of the other dads, but they seemed to belong to an exclusive club that he couldn't figure out how to join. The moms were friendly enough, but he always felt like they were silently judging his wrinkled shirts and Emma's occasionally mismatched outfits. He'd started avoiding school events and parent-teacher conferences, telling himself it was because he was too busy, but really it was because he couldn't bear the feeling of being found wanting. The apartment felt oppressive when he returned home, filled with reminders of all the ways he was falling short. Emma's art supplies were scattered everywhere because he'd never gotten around to organizing them properly. The laundry basket overflowed with clothes that needed folding. The kitchen sink was full of dishes from the night before because he'd been too exhausted to clean up after Emma's bedtime routine. Every corner of their small space seemed to whisper accusations about his failures as a provider, as a homemaker, as a father. Marcus knew something had to change, but he had no idea what that might look like. He was trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and exhaustion, convinced that he was damaging Emma simply by being her only parent. The love he felt for his daughter was overwhelming and absolute, but love alone didn't seem to be enough. He needed help, guidance, something to show him that he wasn't completely hopeless at this most important job of his life. Little did he know that help was about to arrive in the most unexpected form, and that his perspective on fatherhood was about to be transformed in ways he never could have imagined. The coffee shop on Maple Street had become Marcus's refuge during his lunch breaks. It was far enough from the office that he rarely ran into coworkers, and quiet enough that he could sit with his thoughts without interruption. On this particular Tuesday, he'd been nursing the same cup of coffee for 40 minutes, staring blankly at his phone while scrolling through parenting articles that only made him feel worse about himself. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" A warm voice interrupted his brooding. Marcus looked up to see a woman about his age with kind brown eyes and paint-stained fingers. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore a flowing skirt that suggested she was probably an artist or worked somewhere creative. Despite his usual reluctance to engage with strangers, something about her genuine smile made him nod toward the empty chair across from him. "I'm Elena," she said, settling into the seat with her own coffee. "I've seen you here before. You always look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders." Marcus almost smiled at the observation. "Is it that obvious? I'm Marcus. And yeah, I guess I do feel that way most days." Elena studied him for a moment, her head tilted slightly. "Let me guess, you're a single parent." The accuracy of her assessment surprised him. "How did you know that?" "Takes one to know one," she said with a knowing laugh. "Plus, you have that specific look of exhaustion that comes from being the only adult responsible for keeping a small human alive and happy." "How old is yours?" 5. A daughter named Emma. Marcus found himself relaxing slightly. "What about you?" "My son Diego is 8. His dad moved to Seattle for work 2 years ago and decided long-distance parenting wasn't for him." Elena's matter-of-fact tone couldn't quite hide the hurt beneath. "So it's just been me and Diego figuring things out together." There was something comforting about talking to someone who understood the unique challenges of single parenthood. Marcus found himself opening up in a way he hadn't with anyone in months. "Some days I feel like I'm completely failing her. Like, she'd be better off with literally anyone else as a father." Elena leaned forward, her expression serious. "Can I tell you something? I used to think the exact same thing about Diego. I was convinced I was ruining his life just by being his only parent. The guilt was eating me alive." "What changed?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "I started volunteering at a community center that runs after-school programs. I thought maybe if I could help other kids, I'd learn something that would make me better at helping my own." Elena smiled softly. "Turns out I learned something much more important. I discovered that being a loving, imperfect parent is infinitely better than being no parent at all." Marcus felt a spark of interest. "What kind of volunteering?" "Art therapy. Sessions for kids. Many of them come from difficult situations, some with absent parents, some dealing with trauma. But you know what I noticed? The kids whose parents showed up even when those parents were struggling and clearly overwhelmed, those kids had something special. They had someone who cared enough to try." Elena pulled out her phone and showed Marcus a picture of herself covered in finger paint surrounded by a group of laughing children. This was taken last month during a particularly chaotic session. I had paint in my hair, my shirt was ruined, and I had no idea what I was doing half the time. But look at their faces. The joy in the children's expressions was unmistakable. Marcus could see Diego among them, a boy with Elena's warm eyes and an enormous grin. Diego started coming to the sessions, Elena continued. At first, I was worried about bringing work home, but watching him interact with the other kids taught me so much about who he really was. And seeing me work with them showed him that his mom was someone who cared about helping others, not just someone who was constantly stressed about bills and bedtime routines. Marcus found himself leaning forward, engaged despite himself. That sounds amazing, but I don't know anything about art therapy. I can barely help Emma with her coloring books. Elena laughed, a genuine sound that made Marcus realize how long it had been since he'd heard someone laugh without stress underlying it. Neither did I when I started. I was just a freelance graphic designer who thought she might be able to help kids express themselves through drawing. The center provides training, and honestly, most of it is just showing up and being present with the kids. The idea was both terrifying and appealing. Marcus had always been good with children before Emma was born. His friends used to joke that he was a natural with their kids, that he'd make a great father someday. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of that person. I don't know, Marcus said slowly. Between work and Emma, I barely have time to sleep, let alone volunteer. The sessions are Saturday mornings, Elena said gently. Kids can come with their parents or guardians. It's designed for families who need support, not just the children. Emma would be welcome to join you. The offer hung in the air between them. Marcus thought about his typical Saturday mornings, usually spent doing laundry while Emma watched cartoons, both of them in their pajamas until noon because getting dressed felt like too much effort. The idea of having somewhere to go, something purposeful to do together, was tempting. What if I'm terrible at it? Marcus asked, voicing his deepest fear. Elena's expression softened. Marcus, I can tell just from talking to you for 20 minutes that you're not terrible at being a father. You're scared, which means you care. You're overwhelmed, which means you're trying. Those are good things, even when they don't feel like it. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card for the Sunrise Community Center. Think about it. If you decide you're interested, just call and ask for Maria Santos. Tell her Elena sent you. The next orientation session is this Saturday. Marcus took the card, turning it over in his hands. The weight of it felt significant. Somehow, like it might be a lifeline he hadn't known he needed. Can I ask you something? Marcus said as Elena prepared to leave. Do you ever still doubt yourself? Even now that you're helping other parents? Elena paused, her hand on her purse strap. Every single day. But here's what I've learned. The doubt means you're paying attention. It means you want to do better. The parents who never question themselves, who think they have it all figured out, those are the ones I worry about. She stood up, then looked back at Marcus. You know what Diego told me last week? He said he was proud that his mom helps other kids feel better. Not that I'm perfect, not that I never make mistakes, but that I care enough to try to help. That's what kids really need, Marcus. They need to see that caring and trying matters more than being perfect. After Elena left, Marcus sat alone with her words echoing in his mind. For the first time in months, he felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe he wasn't as hopeless as he'd believed. Maybe there was a way forward that didn't involve accepting defeat or resigning himself to being the father he'd never wanted to become. The community center card felt warm in his pocket as he walked back to work, and for the first time in a long while, Marcus found himself looking forward to Saturday instead of dreading it. Saturday morning arrived with Emma bouncing on Marcus's bed at 7 a.m., her hair wild from sleep and her favorite stuffed elephant tucked under her arm. Daddy, you said we're going somewhere special today. Is it the zoo? Is it the playground with the big slide? Marcus smiled despite his nervousness. He'd spent the entire week second-guessing his decision to call the Sunrise Community Center, but Elena's words kept echoing in his mind. When he'd finally worked up the courage to speak, with Maria Santos, her enthusiasm had been infectious. She'd explained that the Saturday morning sessions were designed as much for parents as for children, a safe space where families could connect and learn together. It's somewhere new, Em. A place where kids and parents do art projects together. Marcus helped her choose clothes, grateful when she picked a simple t-shirt and jeans without argument. There will be other children there, and we'll get to be creative together. Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. She'd been asking for art supplies for weeks, but Marcus had been putting it off, worried about the mess and expense. The idea of structured art time with supervision suddenly seemed like the perfect compromise. The Sunrise Community Center was housed in a converted warehouse, its brick exterior covered with colorful murals that immediately caught Emma's attention. "Look, Daddy, there's a rainbow fish and a flying elephant." She tugged on his hand, her earlier morning grumpiness completely forgotten. Inside, the space was warm and welcoming, with high ceilings and large windows that flooded the main room with natural light. Several families were already gathered around tables covered with paper, paints, and various art supplies. The atmosphere was relaxed but purposeful, with soft background music and the gentle hum of conversation. "Marcus!" Elena appeared beside them, Diego trailing behind her with paint already somehow splattered on his shirt despite the session not having started yet. "I'm so glad you decided to come. Diego, this is Emma. Emma, would you like to see what we're making today?" Diego immediately took charge, leading Emma toward a table where several other children were working on what appeared to be collaborative mural. Marcus watched his daughter's face transform with delight as Diego explained that they were creating an underwater scene, and everyone got to add their own sea creatures. "She'll be fine," Elena said softly, reading the anxiety in Marcus's expression. "Maria always pairs new kids with our regulars. Diego loves being the welcoming committee." Maria Santos appeared as if summoned, a compact woman with silver-streaked hair and paint-covered apron who radiated calm authority. "You must be Marcus. Elena's told me so much about you. Welcome to our little creative chaos." The orientation was refreshingly simple. Maria explained that the program wasn't about creating masterpieces or teaching formal art techniques. Instead, it focused on using creative expression as a way for families to connect and communicate. Parents and children worked side by side, sharing materials and ideas without judgment or pressure to produce anything specific. "The magic happens in the process, not the product," Maria said, as she led Marcus to a table where Emma was already deep in conversation with a girl about her age. "Kids this age are natural artists. They create without self-consciousness, without worrying about whether it's good enough. Adults can learn a lot from that approach." Marcus found himself seated next to a single mother named Janet, whose 6-year-old son Tommy was carefully painting what appeared to be a purple dinosaur wearing a tutu. Janet caught Marcus staring and grinned. "Last week he painted a princess dragon. The week before that it was a superhero butterfly. I've given up trying to understand his artistic vision." The easy acceptance in her voice struck Marcus. There was no embarrassment about her son's unconventional art choices, no attempt to redirect him toward more appropriate subjects. She was simply enjoying watching him create. "Emma seems to be settling in well," Janet observed, nodding toward where Emma was now enthusiastically explaining her plan for a rainbow octopus with sparkly tentacles to anyone who would listen. Marcus felt a familiar pang of anxiety. She gets excited about new things, but sometimes she can be a lot. I should probably go check on her. "Why?" Janet asked, her tone curious rather than challenging. "Look at her." Marcus followed her gaze and saw Emma working intently on her section of the mural, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. The other children around her were equally focused, occasionally asking her questions or offering suggestions. There was no chaos, no conflict, just children being children, in a supportive environment. "She's doing exactly what she should be doing," Janet continued. "Being herself, making friends, creating something that makes her happy. Isn't that what we want for our kids?" The simplicity of the observation hit Marcus like a revelation. He'd been so focused on managing Emma's behavior, on making sure she didn't embarrass him or cause problems, that he'd forgotten to simply let her be herself. When had he started seeing her enthusiasm as something to contain rather than celebrate? As the morning progressed, Marcus found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't in months. The other parents were refreshingly normal, dealing with the same daily struggles and doubts that plagued him. Nobody seemed to have it all figured out, and more importantly, nobody pretended to. There were spilled paints and minor disagreements, moments of frustration and bursts of laughter, but through it all was an underlying sense of community that Marcus had been missing without realizing it. Elena appeared at his elbow during a lull, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "How are you feeling about your first session?" "Better than I expected," Marcus admitted, watching Emma collaborate with 3 other children on what was rapidly becoming an elaborate underwater kingdom. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Emma to have a meltdown or for me to do something wrong. And if either of those things happened, what do you think would occur?" Elena asked gently. Marcus considered this. Looking around the room, he saw a toddler having a minor tantrum while his father calmly cleaned up spilled paint. Another child was crying softly, while his mother held him and spoke soothingly about being frustrated when art didn't turn out as planned. In both cases, the other families simply continued with their own projects, offering quiet support when needed, but not treating the situations as catastrophes. "I guess everyone would just deal with it and move on," Marcus said slowly. "Exactly. Kids have feelings, parents make mistakes, life gets messy. But none of that makes us bad people or failures. It just makes us human." The session concluded with a group sharing time where children could show their artwork if they wanted to. Emma proudly displayed her rainbow octopus, explaining in elaborate detail how each tentacle represented a different member of her family, including Marcus, herself, and even Grandma Williams, who lived across the country. "Who's this tentacle for?" Maria asked, pointing to one that seemed to shimmer with extra glitter. "That's for my daddy," Emma said matter-of-factly. "It's the strongest one because he takes care of me all by himself, and that's really hard work." Marcus, I felt tears prick his eyes as the simple truth of his daughter's words sank in. She didn't see him as failing or inadequate. She saw him as strong, as someone working hard to take care of her. The difference in perspective was staggering. As they cleaned up their supplies, Emma chattered excitedly about returning next week. "Can we come back, Daddy? Diego said next time they're making masks, and I want to make one that looks like a butterfly fairy princess." "Of course we can come back," Marcus said, meaning it completely for the first time in weeks. "I think I'd like that too." Walking to the car, Emma's small hand in his, Marcus felt something shift inside him. The overwhelming weight of single parenthood hadn't disappeared, but it felt more manageable somehow. Maybe he wasn't failing after all. Maybe he was just learning, just like every other parent in that room. And maybe that was enough. 3 weeks into their Saturday routine at the community center, Marcus was beginning to see changes in both Emma and himself that he hadn't expected. Emma woke up each Saturday morning with excitement rather than the usual weekend lethargy, already planning what she wanted to create and asking if Diego would be there. But the transformation in Marcus was perhaps even more profound. The other parents had become a source of unexpected support and friendship. Janet had invited them to her son Tommy's birthday party, where Marcus found himself actually enjoying adult conversation while watching Emma play naturally with children she'd met through the program. For the first time since Sarah had left, Marcus felt like he belonged somewhere, like he and Emma were part of a community that accepted them exactly as they were. It was during the 4th Saturday session that Maria approached Marcus with a proposal that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his capabilities as a father. "I've been watching you with the children," Maria said, settling beside him as they observed Emma teaching a newer participant how to blend watercolors. "You have a natural gift for connecting with them. Have you ever considered taking on a more active role here?" Marcus almost laughed at the suggestion. "I think you might be confusing me with someone else. I can barely handle my own kid half the time." Maria's expression was patient but firm. "Marcus, I've been running programs for families for over 15 years. I know the difference between a parent who's struggling to learn and one who genuinely lacks the instinct for working with children. You definitely fall into the first category." She gestured toward where Emma was now helping a shy 7-year-old boy mix colors for his painting. "Emma's confidence has grown tremendously since you started coming here. Do you know why?" Marcus shook his head, genuinely curious. "Because she sees you here, engaged and present, learning alongside her rather than just supervising. Children absorb their parents' attitudes about new experiences. When you show up with openness and willingness to try, she does the same." The observation made Marcus pause. He had noticed that Emma seemed more willing to tackle challenges lately, both at the center and at home. Just last week, she'd attempted to tie her shoes independently for the first time in months, and when she struggled, she'd asked for help rather than dissolving into frustrated tears. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Marcus asked cautiously. "We're starting a new program next month. Father-child workshop specifically designed for single dads and their children. It would meet every other Saturday evening, focusing on activities that help strengthen the parent-child bond while building confidence in both parties." Maria pulled out a folder filled with program outlines and testimonials from similar initiatives in other cities. Research shows that single fathers often struggle with feeling isolated and uncertain about their parenting abilities. This program addresses those challenges directly. Marcus flipped through the materials, reading testimonials from fathers who described the program as transformative, life-changing, essential for their relationships with their children. The activities ranged from cooking simple meals together to building projects that required teamwork and problem-solving. "I don't know," Marcus said slowly. "It sounds amazing, but I'm not sure I'm qualified to help facilitate something like that. What if I say the wrong thing or give bad advice to another parent?" Elena appeared beside them, having finished helping Diego clean up his latest masterpiece. "What's this about bad advice? Marcus gives excellent advice. He's the one who suggested that breathing exercise when Tommy was having his meltdown 2 weeks ago." Marcus had forgotten about that incident. Tommy had become overwhelmed when his painting hadn't matched his vision, and Marcus had instinctively suggested they take 3 deep breaths together and then look at the painting with fresh eyes. The simple technique had worked beautifully. "See?" Elena said to Maria. "Natural instincts. Plus, he's one of the most thoughtful parents here. Always checking on other kids, always willing to share supplies or help clean up." Maria nodded enthusiastically. "The program isn't about being perfect, Marcus. It's about being real. Single fathers need to see other men navigating the same challenges, making mistakes, learning as they go. Your willingness to be vulnerable about your struggles is exactly what would make you valuable as a co-facilitator." The idea was both terrifying and appealing. Marcus thought about how much the Saturday sessions had helped him gain perspective on his relationship with Emma. If he could offer even a fraction of that support to other single fathers, maybe it would be worth stepping outside his comfort zone. "What would my role be exactly?" he asked. "You'd work alongside me and another experienced facilitator to lead activities, share experiences, and provide peer support to the participating fathers. We'd provide training and ongoing supervision, of course. And Emma would be welcome to participate alongside you." Marcus looked across the room where Emma was now engaged in animated conversation with 3 other children, her face bright with confidence and joy. The little girl who had declared him inadequate just a month ago now seemed proud to introduce him to new arrivals as, "My daddy who's really good at art." "Can I think about it?" Marcus asked finally. "Of course," Maria said. "Take all the time you need." "But Marcus, I want you to consider something. You came here thinking you were failing as a father. In just a few weeks, you've become one of our most engaged parents, and Emma has blossomed under your increased confidence. That's not luck or accident. That's you discovering what was always there." That evening, as Marcus and Emma worked together, on a puzzle at their kitchen table, Emma looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy, are you happy now?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Before we started going to art time, you seemed really sad all the time. But now you smile more and you don't look so tired." Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. He'd been so focused on whether he was failing Emma that he hadn't considered how his unhappiness might be affecting her. "I am happier," he said honestly. "Going to the community center has helped me remember some important things." "Like what?" Emma asked, fitting a corner piece into place. "Like how much I love spending time with you, and how creative and smart and kind you are. Sometimes grown-ups forget to notice all the wonderful things about their kids because they're worried about other stuff." Emma nodded solemnly. "Like when I'm worried about my math test and forget to pet Mrs. Johnson's cat on the way to school?" "Exactly. Like that," Marcus said. marveling at her ability to understand complex concepts through simple analogies. "I'm glad you remember now," Emma said, returning her attention to the puzzle. "And I think you should help other daddies remember too." Marcus looked at his daughter in surprise. "What makes you say that?" "Because you're really good at being a daddy, even when you think you're not." And Diego's mom said some daddies don't have anyone to tell them that. The simple wisdom in her words hit Marcus like a revelation. Maybe Maria was right. Maybe his struggles and eventual growth could be valuable to other fathers walking the same difficult path. Maybe his imperfections weren't disqualifications, but rather exactly what other single fathers needed to see. That night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus called Maria and accepted her offer to co-facilitate the father-child program. As he hung up the phone, he felt a familiar flutter of anxiety mixed with something new. Excitement about the possibility of helping others discover what he was only just beginning to understand himself. Being a good father wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, staying present, and being willing to grow alongside his child. The first father-child workshop session arrived with an unexpected snowstorm that had Marcus questioning whether anyone would show up. He'd spent the week preparing materials and reviewing notes from his training sessions with Maria, but nothing had quite prepared him for the nervousness he felt as he and Emma trudged through the snow toward the community center. "What if nobody comes?" he asked Emma as they shook snow from their coats in the entrance. "Then we'll have extra cookies," Emma said pragmatically, referring to the snacks Maria had prepared. "But I think people will come, Daddy. When something is important, people come even when it's snowing." Her confidence proved justified. Despite the weather, 5 fathers arrived with their children, ranging in age from 4 to 10. Marcus recognized the look in their eyes immediately, the same mixture of hope, exhaustion, and barely contained panic that he'd carried for so long. There was David, a recently divorced father of twin 6-year-olds, who admitted he'd never been responsible for his daughter's daily care until 3 months ago. James brought his 8-year-old son, Kevin, explaining quietly that Kevin's mother had died in a car accident the previous year, and they were both struggling to figure out their new normal. Carlos arrived with his 4-year-old daughter, Sophia, who clung to his leg and seemed overwhelmed by the new environment. "Welcome, everyone," Maria began warmly. "Before we dive into our first activity, let's go around the circle and share one thing that brought you here tonight." Marcus felt his palms sweat as his turn approached. When Maria nodded to him, he took a deep breath and spoke from his heart. "A few months ago, I was convinced I was the worst father in the world," he began, his voice steadier than he'd expected. "My daughter Emma here could probably tell you stories about how stressed and frustrated I was all the time. I thought loving her wasn't enough, that I was somehow fundamentally broken as a parent." He glanced down at Emma, who was listening with serious attention. "Coming to the Saturday sessions here changed everything for me. Not because it made parenting easy, but because it showed me that struggling doesn't make you a failure, it just makes you human." The relief in the other fathers' faces was immediate and palpable. David nodded vigorously, while James wiped at his eyes. Even Sophia seemed to relax slightly against her father's leg. The evening's first activity was deceptively simple. Fathers and children working together to build a tower using random materials Maria provided: cardboard tubes, tape, marshmallows, string, and blocks. The catch was that communication had to happen without words for the first 10 minutes. Marcus watched the magic unfold as the pairs struggled to understand each other through gestures and expressions. Emma proved to be an excellent communicator, using exaggerated facial expressions and pointing to indicate her ideas for their tower. When she wanted Marcus to hand her a specific piece, she'd tap the item and then her chest, making it clear what she needed. "This is harder than I thought it would be," David confessed during a break, looking at the leaning tower he and his twin daughters had created. "They keep trying to tell me something, but I can't figure out what." "Maybe try getting down to their level," Marcus suggested. "Sometimes when I'm standing up and Emma's on the floor, we're literally seeing things from different perspectives." David knelt down between his daughters, and immediately their communication improved. The twins began pointing more deliberately, and David started to understand their spatial reasoning in a way he hadn't while towering above them. When the 10 minutes ended and talking was allowed, the room erupted in chatter as fathers and children, explained their strategies, and discussed their creations. Marcus noticed that the initial awkwardness between participants had dissolved into genuine connection and shared laughter. The second activity focused on storytelling, with each father-child pair creating a story together by taking turns adding sentences. Marcus and Emma's tale quickly became an epic adventure involving a brave princess who taught her father how to fly a dragon. "Why does the dad need to learn how to fly the dragon?" Marcus asked, playing along. "Because," Emma said with the patience of someone explaining something obvious, "the princess knows some things that the daddy doesn't know yet, but the daddy knows other things that help keep them both safe while they're learning." The simple wisdom in her words struck not just Marcus but several of the other fathers. James looked particularly moved, and during the reflection time at the end of the session, he shared that his son Kevin had been trying to teach him things about grief and healing that he'd been too afraid to listen to. "I kept thinking I had to protect him from his feelings about his mom," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "But tonight I realized maybe he's been trying to teach me that it's okay to miss her together, that we don't have to be strong all the time." Kevin, who had been quietly building with blocks nearby, looked up at his father. "Dad, I dream about Mommy sometimes. Good dreams where she's still teaching me to ride my bike." James pulled his son close. "I dream about her too, buddy. Maybe we could talk about those dreams sometime." Carlos, who had been mostly quiet throughout the session, spoke up hesitantly. "Sophia's been asking about her mama a lot lately. Her mother moved back to Mexico and doesn't call much anymore. I don't know what to tell her. What does Sophia say when she asks?" Marcus found himself asking, drawing on techniques he'd learned from Maria about letting children guide difficult conversations. "She wants to know if it's her fault that Mama left," Carlos said, his voice breaking slightly. "I tell her no, but I don't think she believes me." Sophia, who had been playing with Emma and the twins, suddenly appeared at her father's side as if sensing the conversation was about her. She climbed into his lap without a word, and Carlos automatically wrapped his arms around her. "Sometimes grown-ups have to go away even when they don't want to," Emma said matter-of-factly to Sophia. "My mommy went away too, but my daddy says it's because she had her own problems to figure out, not because I did anything wrong." The adult conversation paused as the children took over, Sophia nodding seriously while Emma continued explaining her understanding of absent parents with the brutal honesty that only children possess. "My daddy used to cry sometimes," Emma added, "but now he doesn't cry as much because he learned that taking care of me makes him happy, even when it's hard work." Marcus felt his throat tighten with pride and amazement at his daughter's emotional intelligence. When had she become so wise about such complex feelings? As the evening wound down, the fathers exchanged contact information, already making plans to meet for coffee or arrange playdates for their children. The isolation that had brought them all to the program was beginning to crack under the weight of shared experience and mutual support. David lingered as others packed up. "I have to ask, Marcus, how long did it take for you to stop feeling like you were completely winging it every day?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Honestly, I still feel like I'm making it up as I go along most of the time. But the difference is that now I know that's normal. Every parent is improvising, even the ones who seem to have it all figured out. The key thing I've learned," Marcus continued, watching Emma help Sophia put on her coat, "is that our kids don't need us to be perfect. They need us to be present, to be willing to learn, and to love them consistently even when we mess up." James joined their conversation, Kevin balanced on his shoulders. Tonight was the first time Kevin and I have talked about his mom without both of us ending up in tears. Not because we're not sad anymore, but because the sadness felt manageable when it was shared. As families began heading out into the now gentle snowfall, Maria approached Marcus with a satisfied smile. "How do you feel about your first session as co-facilitator?" "Terrified and exhilarated," Marcus admitted, "but also grateful. Watching these fathers connect with their kids and with each other reminded me how far Emma and I have come." Elena appeared beside them, Diego tugging on her hand as he showed off a drawing he'd made during the children's activity time. "You should have seen the fathers' faces when you shared your story at the beginning," she told Marcus. You gave them permission to admit their struggles without shame. Walking to their car, Emma slipped her mittened hand into Marcus's. Daddy, I like when you help other daddies. It makes you smile the way you smile when we're doing art together. What do you mean, sweetheart? Like you're not worried about doing it wrong anymore, like you're just happy to be doing it. Marcus stopped walking for a moment, struck by the profound truth in his 5-year-old's observation. She was right. For the first time since becoming a father, he'd spent an entire evening focused on parenting without the constant undercurrent of anxiety about whether he was failing. He'd been fully present, engaged, and genuinely helpful to other parents, facing the same challenges he'd overcome. You know what, Em? He said, lifting her up despite her protest that she was too big to be carried. I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's exactly the kind of daddy you deserve. As they drove home through the snowy streets, Marcus reflected on the evening's revelations. He wasn't just learning to be a better father to Emma, he was discovering that his struggles and growth could serve a purpose beyond their own family. The self-doubt that had once threatened to crush him was transforming into empathy and wisdom that could help other fathers navigate their own difficult journeys. The realization filled him with a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. Maybe his path through single parenthood, with all its messy failures and small victories, wasn't just about surviving or even thriving. Maybe it was about becoming the kind of father who could light the way for others walking the same dark and uncertain road. 6 months after that first snowy workshop session, Marcus stood in the same community center room, but everything had changed. The space was filled with laughter and the comfortable chaos of 12 father-child pairs engaged in their final session of the program's second cycle. What had started as a small experimental group had grown into something Maria was calling the heart of our family programming. Emma, now 6 and radiating confidence, was helping a new participant's 4-year-old son navigate the art supplies. Marcus watched her demonstrate the patient teaching style she'd learned from Diego months earlier, and felt a familiar swell of pride mixed with amazement at how much they'd both grown. Remember when you couldn't figure out how to help Emma with her feelings? Elena asked, appearing beside him with 2 cups of coffee. She'd become not just a friend, but a co-facilitator for the program, bringing her professional art therapy background to complement Marcus's lived experience as a single father. You mean last Tuesday when she had a meltdown about her shoes feeling too squishy? Marcus replied with a grin. Some things never change completely. But you handled it differently, Elena observed. You got down to her level, acknowledged her feelings, and helped her problem solve instead of getting frustrated and making it worse. Marcus nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. The meltdown that would have sent him into a spiral of self-doubt 6 months ago had become just another moment requiring patience and understanding. Not because Emma had stopped having big feelings, but because Marcus had learned to meet those feelings with calm presence instead of panic. The final activity of the session was one Marcus had designed himself. Each father-child pair created a growth timeline, showing how their relationship had changed over the course of the program. Using photos, drawings, and written reflections, families documented their journey from their first nervous workshop to their current confident partnership. David, whose twin daughters had once overwhelmed him with their constant needs, now moved between them with easy competence, helping them articulate their memories of learning to work together. Remember when we couldn't build that tower because I kept trying to do it my way instead of listening to your ideas? He asked them. And remember when we learned that fathers can learn things from daughters too? 6-year-old Maya added, carefully, gluing a photo from their first session onto their timeline. James and Kevin had created perhaps the most poignant display, incorporating photos of Kevin's mother alongside images of their workshop activities. Instead of avoiding her memory, they'd learned to weave it into their new reality as a family of 2. Mom would have liked seeing us cook together, Kevin said, pointing to a photo of himself and James covered in flour from a particularly chaotic baking session. She always said cooking was about love, not about making it perfect. Carlos and Sophia had documented their growing ability to communicate across language barriers, with Sophia becoming increasingly bilingual as she helped her father practice English while he taught her Spanish phrases for their art projects. Their timeline included recordings of Sofia translating for newer Spanish-speaking families, her pride evident in every carefully pronounced word. But it was the newest addition to their group that reminded Marcus most powerfully of his own transformation. Michael had arrived 3 weeks earlier with his 7-year-old daughter Zoe, carrying the same haunted expression Marcus recognized from his own early days of single parenthood. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong," Michael had confessed during his first session. "Zoe was so happy before the divorce, and now she barely talks to me. I feel like I'm failing her every single day." The words could have been Marcus's own from 8 months earlier. But now, instead of relating through shared despair, Marcus found himself able to offer perspective born from hard-won experience. "The first thing to know is that you're not failing her," Marcus had told Michael. "Divorce is hard on kids, and it takes time to adjust to new routines and dynamics. The fact that you're here, trying to connect with her, means you're already doing something right." Tonight, Marcus watched Michael and Zoe working together on their timeline, their heads bent close as they discussed which photos to include. The rigid tension that had characterized their early interactions had softened into something that looked increasingly like partnership. "I never thought I'd see Zoe laugh again," Michael had confided to Marcus during their coffee break. "But watching her with Emma and the other kids, seeing how comfortable she is here, it's like I'm getting my daughter back." "You never lost her," Marcus had replied. "You just both needed time to figure out how to be a family in a new way. That's what this place teaches us, that families come in all different shapes and there's no single right way to make them work." As the evening concluded with the traditional sharing circle, Marcus listened to each father reflect on their growth with a sense of profound satisfaction. These men had arrived broken and doubting, convinced they were inadequate for the task of single parenthood. They were leaving with tools, confidence, and most importantly, a community of support that would continue beyond the formal program. "Marcus, would you like to share your reflection as co-facilitator?" Maria asked. Marcus looked around the circle at the faces that had become so familiar and dear to him. "When I first came to this community center, I was drowning. I loved Emma more than life itself, but I was convinced that love wasn't enough, that I was somehow fundamentally unsuited to be her father." Emma, sitting beside him, reached over and squeezed his hand encouragingly. "What I learned here wasn't how to be a perfect parent," Marcus continued. "I learned how to be a present parent. I learned that struggling doesn't make you weak, and asking for help doesn't make you a failure. Most importantly, I learned that our children don't need us to have all the answers. They need us to be willing to figure things out together." He paused, looking at Emma, who was beaming at him with unconditional love and pride. "6 months ago, Emma told me she was proud that her daddy helps other kids feel better. That comment changed everything for me because I realized she was seeing something I couldn't see in myself. She saw a father who cared enough to keep trying, to keep growing, to keep showing up even when things were hard." The room was quiet except for the sound of tissues being pulled from boxes as several fathers wiped their eyes. "I used to think that being a single father meant I was giving Emma less than she deserved," Marcus concluded. "Now I understand that what we've built together is exactly what she needed. Not a perfect family, but a real one. Not a father who never struggles, but one who faces those struggles with courage and gets help when he needs it." After everyone had shared and the cleanup was complete, Marcus and Emma walked to their car under a clear night sky studded with stars. Emma was unusually quiet, and Marcus wondered if she was tired or processing the emotional evening. "Daddy?" she said as he was buckling her seatbelt. "Yes, sweetheart? I want to tell you something important." Marcus knelt beside her car seat, giving her his full attention. "I used to worry that maybe you didn't really want to be my daddy, because you seem so sad all the time," Emma said, her voice serious but not distressed. "But now I know you were just learning how to be the best daddy for me, and I think you figured it out." Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes. "What makes you think I figured it out?" "Because now when people ask me about my family, I don't feel sad anymore. I feel proud. I tell them my daddy takes care of me and helps other daddies too, and that makes me feel really special." As they drove home through familiar streets, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The man who had once questioned whether he should even be a father had become someone who helped other fathers discover their own worth and capabilities. The relationship he'd once feared was damaged beyond repair had become a source of strength and joy that extended far beyond their small family of two. Emma fell asleep in the car, her face peaceful in the glow of passing streetlights. Looking at her in the rearview mirror, Marcus felt the deep contentment that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're meant to do. He was no longer the father who doubted his every decision or worried constantly about failing his daughter. He was the father Emma had always seen him as, imperfect but devoted, struggling but persistent, learning but always present. Most importantly, he was finally the father he'd always had the potential to become, once he learned to see himself through the eyes of love rather than the lens of fear. The community center had given him more than par. The community center had given him more than parenting skills or confidence. It had given him the gift of perspective, the knowledge that his struggles had meaning beyond his own family's healing. In helping other fathers discover their own strength, Marcus had finally discovered his own. And in that discovery, both he and Emma had found the complete and happy family they'd been searching for all along.